Welcome to an overview of classical conditioning, a behavioral learning theory. This is the second of 6 presentations on behavioral learning theories as they apply to schooling and education. My name is Bill Hewitt, and I am Professor Emeritus at Valdosta State University and Adjunct Professor at Capella and Walden Universities. There are 2 primary objectives for this brief presentation. First, you'll be able to name and describe the basic model of classical conditioning. And second, you'll be able to describe the components of classical conditioning and give an example of how this could impact emotional behavior. Ivan Pavlov, who lived between 1849 and 1936, was the major theorist for classical conditioning. He was a Russian scientist trained in biology and medicine, as was his Austrian contemporary, Sigmund Freud, who developed the psychodynamic approach to the study of personality. At the time of his discovery of the laws of classical conditioning, Pavlov was studying the digestive systems of dogs. As in all behavioral theories, classical conditioning treats the organism, which includes all animals, including human beings, as a black box. That is, it is assumed there is an internal behavior that is hidden from the observer or researcher, and therefore does not enter into the theory of what explains behavior. In classical conditioning, there is a direct, automatic, or reflexive connection between a stimulus that comes before the response, that is, it is antecedent, and the response itself. The stimulus elicits or provokes a behavior that already exists. Classical conditioning is also called respondent conditioning because the organism responds automatically and involuntarily to a specific stimulus. For example, if a puff of air is blown into a person's eye, the person will automatically blink. The specific model for classical conditioning, or learning in the classical conditioning paradigm, starts with a stimulus that will elicit the target behavior. Using classical conditioning terminology, an unconditioned stimulus, labeled a UCS, elicits an unconditioned response, labeled a UCR. In the example, a puff of air, the UCS, elicits an eye blink, the UCR. There is also available a neutral stimulus, an NS, that is attended to by the organism, that is, it elicits an orienting response, or an OR. However, it does not elicit the target behavior. The NS could be anything, such as a light, a bell, or a person, that will draw the organism's attention. In this example, a hot dog, labeled a UCS, when presented to a dog that has been deprived of food, will elicit a salivating response, labeled a UCR. Just before the presentation of the hot dog, the researcher rings a bell, the neutral stimulus, or sometimes called the orienting stimulus, that produces an orienting response, OR. The NS is repeatedly paired with the UCS. That is, the bell is rung, and then the hot dog is presented to a dog that has been deprived of food. The NS, the bell, is continuously paired with the UCS, the hot dog. The UCS elicits the salivation response, the UCR, in the dog. Through the process of pairing, the dog learns to associate the 2 stimuli, the bell and the hot dog. Eventually, the NS, the bell, is associated with the UCS, hot dog, such that it will elicit the salivation response. This bell is now labeled a conditioned stimulus, or CS, because it elicits the salivation response through a learned association. The salivation response is now labeled a conditioned response, or CR. When the bell elicits the salivation response, it does so because of learning. The salivation response in the 2 situations is essentially the same, but because the stimulus that elicits it does so through a learning process, the label given to it is changed. While there are a wide variety of ways that animals and human beings are classically conditioned, the most often occurrence in a classroom or school setting is when a stimulus that will automatically elicit a specific emotion, such as happy, sad, excited, or fearful, becomes associated with a previously neutral stimulus, such as a teacher, another student, a subject, the classroom, or the school. For example, a child goes to school and does not do well on a math lesson. Not doing well on the math lesson will automatically produce a negative response of anxiety or perhaps negative emotion. If these are continually paired, the student goes to school and does not do well on a lot of math lessons, then math, or perhaps the school, becomes associated with the emotional response of anxiety or negative emotion. The neutral stimulus, or NS, the school or perhaps math, will eventually begin to elicit the anxiety or negative emotion elicited by doing poorly in math, because it has been transformed into a CS, a conditioned stimulus. Simply seeing or even thinking about the school or math will now elicit the anxiety or negative emotion because it is associated with doing poorly in math. This is a learned association. Another example, the child may be bullied or harassed by other students and feels anxious or fearful when this happens. That is, the UCS of being harassed elicits the UCR of anxiety or fear. If the child is bullied quite often at school, the UCS of being harassed or bullied becomes associated with the previously neutral stimulus, NS, the school. As a result of this learning that the two stimuli, the school and being bullied, are associated, going to school or even thinking about school will elicit the anxiety or fear response. The previously neutral stimulus has been transformed into a conditioned stimulus through a learning process. In summary, classical conditioning, as it is most often seen in school, will involve learning to associate different stimuli that elicit emotional responses. It is important to remember that the learned association is a result of a constant pairing between two stimuli. Therefore, in order to extinguish or eliminate the feeling of fear or anxiety when thinking about or entering the school, that association must be broken or discontinued. Simply talking to the child about not worrying about what others say or do, or encouraging the child to do his best in math will not work. The child actually has to experience being successful in math or going to school and being treated pleasantly. Old connections have to be eliminated and new connections have to be established. This is the second in a series of presentations on behavioral learning theories. The first in this series was an overview of the major categories of behavioral learning theories. The next three presentations include an overview of operant conditioning, the techniques used in operant conditioning, and the schedules used in applying consequences in operant conditioning. The series ends with a discussion of behavior modification techniques derived from the behavioral learning theories. There are also quizzes available that allow you to check your understanding of the behavioral learning theories.